instigator of this project. We are now going to discuss the module Questions, a Transformational Generative Grammar Account. The module has been authored by Professor K.A. Jayashilan, Professor Retired, English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad.
Questions, a Transformational Grammar Account. You were introduced to the question type constructions in paper 6A, Grammatical Categories. In this module, we take up an analysis of question type sentences within the framework of transformational grammar. Types of questions. Languages show a variety of ways in which questions are asked. There are two types of questions to consider: yes-no questions and constituent questions. They are illustrated below. Yes-no questions. Can you swim? Is it raining? Does a bird fly? Constituent questions, also known as WH questions. Who stole the cheese? What did you see? How does a bird fly? Yes-no questions, as the name implies, can be answered by yes or no. But a constituent question cannot be answered in that way because it asks for information about a constituent of the sentence. For example, who stole the cheese? Asks you to fill in some information about who. The answer can be, a mouse stole the cheese. There is yet another type of question which is closely related to a yes-no question, called an alternative question. It requires you to choose between two or more alternatives that are given. For example, alternative questions. Do you want tea or coffee? Did you boil the potato or bake it? Is it going to rain or is it going to snow? 3A can be answered by, for example, coffee. But yes would not be an appropriate answer. An alternative question contains one or more phrases connected by or. For example, tea or coffee. We call or a disjunction marker or disjunctive connective, and we call the phrases connected by or disjuncts. The disjuncts in 3A that you saw are two noun phrases. The ones in 3B are two verb phrases. And the ones in 3C are two finite clauses. Now, as we said, yes-no questions are very closely related to alternative questions, both syntactically and semantically. It's been argued that the yes-no question in the sentence 4A that you see on the screen has the underlying representation 4B. That is it raining? Has the underlying representation, is it raining or not raining? The claim is that the second disjunct of 4B is suppressed because it is obvious in the context. If this claim is right, ordinary yes-no questions are also a type of alternative question, one in which the alternatives are a clause and its negation. For this reason, the yes-no questions are also called polarity questions because the alternatives they offer are the polar opposites, true or false. Let's talk about yes-no questions. The idea that even ordinary yes-no questions contain a disjunction in the underlying representation becomes more plausible when we make a survey of questions in a large number of the world's languages. In a great many languages, the way to make a yes-no question from a declarative sentence is to add the disjunction marker to it. Consider, for example, Sinhala. The sentence is, given there with the English meanings. So does the minister want tea or coffee? Does Chitra read this book? Now in Sinhala, the disjunction marker is the, as shown in the data. The same the is added at the end of the sentence in 5b to turn the declarative sentence Chitra e pota kiyewa. Chitra read the book into a question. The same way of making a question is employed in Malayalam too. Let's take a look at the data on Malayalam. For the sentences John or Bill or Peter. And did John come? Now the disjunction marker of Malayalam is O. The same O is added at the end of the declarative sentence John vannu, John came, to make it a question. Again, this way of making a yes-no question is found in Japanese, Dutch and Polish. Note that these languages, for example, Sinhala, Malayalam, Japanese, Dutch, Polish, are from different language families and are typologically very different. When the disjunction marker is used to make a yes-no question, it's functioning as a question particle, that is, as an element that signals a question. Many languages use question particles to signal a question. The question particle need not always be the same as the disjunction marker of the language. For example, Hindi Urdu uses kya, meaning what, as its question particle, but its disjunction marker is ya. John aayega kya? Will John come? Depending on the basic word order of the language, the question particle is placed at the beginning or the end of the clause. Thus in Malayalam, Sinhala and Japanese, the question particle comes at the end of the clause, and in Dutch and Polish, it comes at the beginning of the clause. Let's take a look at English. English, of course, does not use a question particle to signal a yes-no question. How does English make a yes-no question then? It does so by moving tense to the left of the subject. But tense always needs a verb to lean on too. You learned in module 5 that the tense attaches itself to the first verb to its right. So tense, when it moves to the left of the subject, takes with it the auxiliary verb it is attached to. We can state this rule of English as follows. Subject auxiliary inversion. Move tense together with the auxiliary verb to which tense is attached to the left of the subject. The operation of this rule can be seen in the following pairs of sentences. 9. He can swim. Can he swim? He would have passed the examination if he had tried. Would he have passed the examination if he had tried? It's raining. Is it raining? But as we already said in module 5, English has a problem when a sentence that contains no auxiliary verb has to be turned into a question. For example, John loves Mary. There is no auxiliary verb here, and tense attaches itself to the main verb. The problem is that the English main verb is lazy. It refuses to move. English nowadays inserts a dummy auxiliary verb, do, and tense attaches itself to it and moves it to the left of the subject. Does John love Mary? Here are some more examples of question formation that involve the insertion of do. They left early. Did they leave early? William stands on his head to greet the sun. Does William stand on his head to greet the sun? To sum up the discussion so far, languages predominantly have two strategies to signal a yes-no question. One, the use of a question particle, and 2, a word order change. Constituent questions. Now let's look at constituent questions. Constituent questions contain a question word or phrase. English question words begin with the segment WH, who, what, where, when, why, which. The only exception is how. For this reason, in the linguistics literature, it's become the convention to refer to question words as WH words, as we noted earlier. And the movement of a question word phrase is referred to as the WH movement. In the following sentences, the WH words are in bold type. Observe their position in the sentence on your screen. Who saw you? Whom did you see? When did you see him? Where did you see him? How did you see him? The meaning of a question like who saw you can be paraphrased as follows. Someone saw you. Identify that person. A constituent question always asks the hearer to identify, that is, make more specific something. Thus, in the sentence 16c, when did you see him, the hearer is asked to specify the time of seeing him. So a constituent question is also called a specification question for this reason. In English, the WH phrase is moved to the beginning of the interrogative clause. This movement is not clearly seen when the subject is questioned, as in 16a. That is, who saw you? However, in English, the WH phrase is moved to the beginning of the interrogative clause. This movement is not clearly seen when the subject is questioned, as in the sentence, who saw you? This is because the subject is already at the beginning of the clause. But you can clearly see it in the sentence 16b, whom did you see, where the direct object is questioned. The WH phrase whom is generated as the object of see, and it is moved to the beginning of the clause as you see it in the illustration. Now this is an instance of WH movement, so whom has been moved from its object position to the beginning of the sentence position. Let us look more closely at the movement shown in 17. That is the sentences that have gone before, especially the sentence, whom did you see? Where exactly does whom move to? The current thinking in Chomskyan linguistics is that there is a position immediately above the clause, which WH movement targets. To see the need for this position, we must look at an ordinary case of an embedded clause like in 18. He said that Bill saw Mary. The function of that is to introduce the embedded clause, Bill saw Mary, which is the sentential complement of the matrix verb say. Now, such complement introducing particles are called complementizers. That is a complementizer. And the position in which the complementizer is generated is called comp, C-O-M-P. The comp position becomes visible only when something fills it. Thus in 18, that is, he said that Bill saw Mary, the complementizer that makes it visible. But in a root clause like 19 that you see on the screen, what one might wonder is the need for postulating comp. You saw Bill. The need for comp here too becomes clear when we question a constituent of 19. For example, replace Bill with whom. A WH phrase in English must move to the beginning of the clause, and the position it moves to is comp. So WH movement also makes comp visible. WH movement moves the WH phrase to a position which is to the left of the complementizer in comp, and tends together with its auxiliary, moves into the position of the complementizer. This can be diagrammed as in the sentence 20, see on the screen. There are two movements in this sentence. First, there is a movement of the WH phrase, whom. Second, there is subject auxiliary verb inversion. So the verb is moved, that with the tense is moved to the beginning of this subject position. Now note that even in a yes-no question like did you see Mary, there is subject auxiliary inversion, although there is no WH phrase to move here. Look at this diagram. This movement too we can see is to the comp position. So far, we have only looked at constituent questions in the root clause. These are called direct questions. They require an answer from the hearer. But there are also indirect questions, where the question is only reported and is in an embedded clause. Consider the sentence on your screen, sentence 22. The police asked the witness what he saw. Here, what, which is generated at the object of saw, is moved to the comp of the embedded clause. Note that there is no subject auxiliary inversion in an indirect question. Also note that when a WH phrase is moved into comp, the complementizer that cannot be generated in comp. Many languages of the world do WH movement to comp in their constituent questions. But an equally large number of languages do not do this. How do the languages of India form their constituent questions? This is still a research question. It is difficult to give any definite answers. But by and large, Indian languages do not move a WH phrase to the left edge of the clause.
Summary. So we have looked at in great detail the various types of questions that are found in world languages. We looked mainly at 4 types of questions: the yes-no question, the constituent question, are also known as WH question, the alternative questions, which involve the use of or, and finally the indirect questions. We saw how the notion of deep structure and the device of WH movement of constituents of a sentence allows us to provide a unified account of the different types of questions that are found in world languages, as varied as English, Malayalam, Sinhala, and Polish. Thank you.